Okay, I'm going to have a quick discussion of the intermediate shaft. The intermediate shaft sits off to the side from where the crankshaft goes, and it is driven by a chain that engages the gear that you see in this picture. There's a smaller gear at this end and a smaller gear at that end, and those gears drive timing chains that reach out to the intake and exhaust camshafts on the engine. One for bank 1 and one for bank 2. So, from a lubrication standpoint, which is what this video series has been about, it's pretty well established if you read about IMS bearings and failures and what have you, that the original design for the bearings on the IMS are not fed by oil from the engine. They're rather a closed off ball bearing. And on the quote unquote big end, this is the bearing that fails. It's the bearing that has been redesigned by various folks with different design concepts. It's my understanding on the M97 engine for the 2006 through 2009 Cayman that the failure rate on this bearing is very low, like maybe less than 1%, I believe is the number LN Engineering quotes. And you can improve on that further, and you can't see it, but you can remove the grease seal on the inside of the bearing, and it'll receive splash oil from the engine. So in the case of my rebuild, I'm going to be replacing the bearing and removing the seal. So I feel pretty comfortable with that. I was curious about the other end, and this is a little bit interesting. The oil pump, as we saw in the previous video, is driven off the end of the intermediate shaft. I've got it assembled right here, but I'm going to stop the video and take it apart, and then we'll pick up the discussion. Okay, I've disassembled the intermediate shaft from the oil pump. So basically on the oil pump, there's a precisely machined female hole, and on the end of the intermediate shaft, there's a precisely machined male shaft. And those two fit into each other and behave as bearings. The oil pump is hard mounted to the end of the block. It's got the ID shell opening that you see here that the OD of the intermediate shaft fits in. There's a small clearance. It's highly polished, hardened materials. There's bearings. Those are the bearing surfaces. Not replaceable like your big bearings on your rod and your crankshaft, but bearing all the same. And I was wondering how this gets its lubrication. And if I look down into the hole there, you see a very small rectangular opening. And I'm pretty sure that that is communicates to the pressurized oil in the oil pump, and oil is introduced into that cavity, and then it works its way out and spills. Again, talk about where does oil go when it gets done. It spills out into the body of the interior of the block and returns to the sump. So this is a pressure-fed oil bearing for the small end of the intermediate shaft. Not the one that's causing all the angst. That's the one up at the other end.